Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Davis Bowling with Radiant Vision Systems, and today we're going to talk about replicating human vision in near-to-eye display applications. Just a real brief summary about Radiant. We're experts in measuring light and color, automated visual inspection, and we have global support. We have multiple offices worldwide and teams of engineers that travel globally to support our systems around the world. So let's talk about challenges in measuring near-to-eye display systems. The first thing is, why are we doing this? Radiant has seen, and the world has seen, a pretty substantial growth in the market for AR/VR devices. We didn't really see a knock your socks off type of solution available in the market to measure these types of devices. Near-to-eye display, by definition, is viewed near to the eye. Any projections that are delivered into the eye are going to be magnified with a very wide field of view. Any kind of defects that are apparent on a display for a wide field of view device tend to be quite noticeable. There can be screen door effects from pixelation of the displays, for example. Any kind of dead pixel or non-uniformity of the pixels could be pretty detrimental to a user's experience. These devices are fairly expensive and new, so if somebody received one and there are a bunch of dead pixels, it's likely that would drive a return. These devices tend to be in some kind of head-mounted display. So a compact optical system is required in order to get the imaging device to the correct eye relief position to emulate the human eye's location relative to the device for the testing of the device. So what kind of measurement criteria might someone want to analyze with these types of systems? Luminance and color are definitely of interest. Image and clarity is kind of a big one. The optics that are being used to render these displays at infinity or some particular working distance tend to be relatively complex. Due to the fact that these need to be mass-produced devices, there are trade-offs that are made on the optics. So quantifying the effect of those optics or characterizing the devices to see if they're meeting spec is something that could potentially be quite interesting. There tends to be some distortion from these devices, and that's something that typically needs to be characterized. Also, if you wanted to qualify the optics or on a fully assembled system, confirm that the alignment is done correctly, these are things that you might want to test for. In addition, there's focus uniformity. The focus on these devices tends to be relatively ununiform, and so it might be something that would be interesting to characterize. Then also one of the main specifications that manufacturers are listing for these devices is the field of view. The field of view can be a little bit of a subjective specification. It can be dependent on the exit pupil of the device, the entrance pupil of the observer. So this specification may say one thing, but it might be very interesting to actually verify what the true field of view of the device is. Okay, so let's touch on some technical advantages of the Radiant solution. Replicating the human eye, what's required for that? We want to try to simulate the eye pupil size, and we don't want to sacrifice too much in the same process. We also want to try to get the entrance pupil of the optic located at the same place as the entrance pupil of the human eye. We also want to cover the approximate field of view of human binocular vision. It's going to be approximately 120 degrees, and that's what our system is designed to capture. Imaging is important for this type of solution. You may be very interested in what's going on in many different areas of the display. You may be looking for some kind of mura, like a blemish on the display. You may be interested in the uniformity of the display, and you're just not going to be able to capture that information effectively with a spot meter. With a spot meter, it is possible, but in this case, you'd have to make many movements, and the cycle time could be very extensive. Radiant's goal was to design a solution that is applicable in the laboratory, but also really wanted to support production applications. We would expect that this could be done as a final assembly test with a Radiant 2D colorimeter, in addition to the R&D and laboratory testing. This is just a quick example of a test that's designed to find some point defects. So here's an image. We've generated a local contrast, and we found some defects in this image that we're highlighting to the operator, or that could go into a report after the fact. What's important about designing this system to replicate the size of the human pupil? Basically, we want to try to image the device the same way that a human would see it if they were using it. So we're trying to replicate approximately the pupil size of a human. If we were to make the pupil really, really small, that might make the lens design easier, but then we'd be really limiting the light that could make it into our sensor. And so exposure times would be extra long. Any kind of vibrations would really impact the system. So making the pupil too large would make the optical design exceptionally challenging and much more expensive. We have compromised on this specification, but we believe that it's a fair compromise. So replicating human perception in terms of the aperture position of the optic, you can see that if the aperture is internal, we're going to be occluding the display. If the aperture is at the front of the optic, then we can visualize the entire field of view. Again, looking at what a standard lens looks like, the aperture is buried inside of the lens. With this lens that's specifically designed for this type of application, it's really important that the entrance pupil or aperture of the optic is at the front of the lens, here at this location. Now we're able to get the field of view that's desired, and we're not occluded by the exit aperture, the exit pupil of the device that we're looking at. This is just a way to try to visualize what it is that I'm discussing here. So if the entrance pupil is far from the exit pupil of the device, you would see the image on the left. Effectively, the image is occluded, and you can still see some of what it is you're trying to look for, but a lot of the sensor space is effectively wasted. However, if you can put the entrance pupil at the front of the lens, then the field of view is more efficiently utilized, and we're able to get around the occlusion of the exit pupil of the device. Okay, so let's talk about Radiant solution. This is a Radiant I-Series 2D imaging colorimeter with the near-to-eye lens or ARVR lens attached. To review, the aperture is located at the front of the lens, and that's how we're able to image these devices effectively. We have chosen to use a 3.6 millimeter aperture, which is a good compromise between a constricted pupil and a fully dilated pupil. The field of view does hit the 120-degree requirement. That's a horizontal field of view, and the vertical field of view reaches 80 degrees. Then we must be able to do a distortion calibration because this really is like a fisheye lens. Without a distortion removal or distortion calibration, you would normally see an image that looks like the one on the left with a lot of barrel distortion. After you've applied Radiant's distortion calibration, you would see a normal appearing image like it is on the right. And what we're viewing here is just a standard rectilinear grid pattern. TrueTest software is an important component in the solution for operation and analysis. TrueTest is a testing sequencer software that can control a suite of testing and measurement algorithms. We have a number of tests that are available, and they're good for standard displays. We've also developed a number of tests that are great for this specific application in the ARVR space of display testing. Things like slanted edge, MTF, image distortion, measuring the device's field of view, and then also having the system read out results in degrees. When you're looking at a virtual image that's focused at infinity, we can't really indicate where our pixel is in meters or centimeters. What we really need to be able to report is that information in degrees. These are just examples of some of the standard display tests available in TrueTest. ANSI brightness, point-based uniformity. We can look for pixel and line defects, mirror defects, and J and D are just noticeable difference. Image clarity is really important for these types of applications because of the optics that are used to relay the image from the display to the human eye. And often, this is one of the most important characteristics that needs to be understood. There are a number of ways to do this. Primarily, this is going to be done with some kind of MTS test. There's also an ISO standard which describes how to do a slant edge test. We have a test based on that as well. Then there's also a line pairs test, which we also have a test to handle. Slant edge contrast. This is just an example of what comes out of this. You present the slanted edge to the system so that pixelation doesn't cause a major problem. And then we sum up many different cross sections of this, which is the chart you can see at the top. We take the derivative of that cross section average, and then the FFT of that becomes the MTF curve. And this report becomes available after the measurement is completed. Line pair measurement. This is another way to assess the image clarity. We're presenting horizontal lines as a pattern on the device, and then we're looking at the contrast in these regions. There are various headset effects that can occur. Distortion certainly is interesting to understand and characterize. This could potentially help gain a better understanding of the alignment of the system. It also might be interesting to characterize the distortion of different colors to see if there's any kind of chromatic aberration associated with the system. Spatial positions given in degrees is pretty important. Software testing is performed in a sequence. TrueTest is a highly optimized testing sequencer, and it can run fully asynchronously. It's really well pipelined. We're under pressure constantly to try to improve the speed of our systems, improve the speed of our deployed systems, and being able to take advantage of multi-threading, CPUs that have many, many cores. All modern computing is fully taken advantage of with this software. In addition, Radiant offers an API device interface. This really shouldn't be discounted either. TrueTest is very modular. If you have developers available, then they can actually help to construct interfaces between the testing sequencer and the device under test. Just to touch on that, we wrote a new device interface, which we call the ARVR video pattern generator. A lot of these displays, the way you drive a signal to them is that you basically give it a duplicated signal or a left and a left image that are identical. We have a device or interface that is a video pattern generator, which will output those patterns on HDMI or DVI or whatever kind of video output it is that you have on your PC. Just an example of what a test sequence might look like. Many different patterns. Each pattern can be analyzed for as many different types of analysis as required. The sequencer takes care of understanding what measurements are needed and what measurements are not needed. And it just takes the minimum number of measurements required to be able to perform all the analysis that has been asked for. And all of this can, again, happen asynchronously. Analysis is happening while the camera is measuring. So the solution that we are proposing is this AR/VR lens, or wide field of view lens, which we've developed. This has taken us quite a bit of time. It's a further revision, and it's working quite well. We're really happy with the results that we've seen so far, plus our Prometric imaging 2D colorimeter, and then finally the TrueTest software, and specifically our TrueTest AR/VR module is going to be very appropriate for this application. In summary, a growth of embedded and AR/VR markets really required Radiant to step up and come up with a better solution for imaging these types of devices. We've had some success with this in the past, but recently we've really pushed the company to have something available that can really work for many different types of customers and many different applications. And this is the root of that. Standard display measurement systems really are not appropriate for this application. And if you're going to run into a lot of trouble trying to use those. Our solution is the only one that we're really aware of right now that can replicate the human pupil size, position within the goggles, and capture the full field of view. Thank you for your time, and I now look forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Davis, for the deep dive to the display design and testing. Now we all know what to look on a quality HMD. So this time also we probably have only one or two questions in our timing limits. And a question on the stream was that, can the lens be exchanged with standard optics?
Yeah, okay, good question. So the simple answer is yes. The way we're building our camera hardware, so our colorimeters and our photometers, They're designed to handle Canon EF mount lenses. And so this particular optic that we've highlighted here is built for a Canon EF mount lens. And so many of our customers actually use this, what we call ARVR lens, to make measurements, but then they can take it off and then put in one of the different Canon lenses that we also offer.
Okay, then there's another question. What about the luminance and color uniformity in a binocular setup, like the human visual system?
I'm trying to imagine what. So what we're doing on the hardware side is we are making the optic, and the optic is designed such that the entrance pupil is at the front of the lens. But we're also making the hardware, which is bringing the information in from the optic. So we're making a colorimeter, which is designed to match up with tristimulus filters to give then CIE or CXCY type values, which directly correlates kind of to how humans recognize light and color. If somebody's only interested in something like luminance, uniformity, but doesn't really care so much about the color side of things, then we also have a 2D photometer that this lens can be attached to. And in this case, then we can measure something like uniformity as again, a human would kind of recognize that brightness.
Okay, thank you, Davis.